Starting with the TTSC first, like I mentioned in the introduction, Medcor just listed on the market on July 1. They had their IPO May, June, and they've already announced their very first dividend of 1 TT dollar, which is a pretty nice dividend, especially compared to what some Jamaican companies pay. So, for those not familiar with Medcor and who they are, just give us a brief background about the company.
So, they operate a private hospital in Trinidad and Tobago and a couple other medical facilities. So, just give me a second, let me just bring it up. So, they offer executive health services, they offer the Brian Hare Cancer Treatment Center, and a couple other specialized treatment facilities based in Trinidad and Tobago. So, they're planning to expand part of their facilities from the IPO proceeds while benefiting from the proceeds benefiting from the tax exemption that comes with the listing on the TTSME market. So, founded by Dr. Kongshik Achong Low and a couple other major shareholders in 1993, this is officially the fourth TTSME listing, and according to the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, the market capitalization, the combined market capitalization of the SME market has now exceeded 1 billion TTD. Just to give context, that is 123 billion Jamaican dollars, using a rate of 23 to 1.
Is that more than what the Jamaica junior market is valued?
No. So the junior market is around 150 billion Jamaican dollars across, I believe, 48 companies at the moment.
So that's not a billion yet. It's very close, though.
Billion TTD on their side. So
billion TT, right.
As I said, 23 billion Jamaican dollars at the translated amount. So this actually is one of the most significant IPOs in their SME market's history. So just to give some quick synopsis of history, 2009, the late Don Obi, may his soul rest in peace, alongside other stakeholders, introduced the junior market in 2009. After financial listed, then Lasco, then Honeybun, and so on, and we just saw a flurry of listings. Now, Trinidad said, hey, well, like what Jamaica did, let's do something here about Trinidad. So they formed something called the TTSME market back in 2011. However, the market interest was basically mute. What do you mean by that? So the first listing for the TTSME market was in November 2018. Remember, for
7 years.
Correct, just for their first listing. At the time, their first listing was a company called Cinema One Limited, and Cinema One Limited only raised TT 14.4 million out of the $30.8 million they were targeting. So they were just slightly below half of the original targeted amount.
Is that the same company that was talking about entering Jamaica?
No, that's not it. So the company referring to is Movietown. There's the company that's in Tobago and Guyana. Cinema One was founded in 2007 or 8 or 9 by Brian and Ingrid Jara and a couple other major private stakeholders. So the Jaras, very experienced individuals, formed Cinema One, grew the business, and they have now expanded through the IPO. They just recently opened a new location at Price Plaza. They're at One Woodbrook Place in Trinidad and Tobago. And if you actually go on Google and look at their Gemstone movie theaters, you're like, wait, what is a Palace Amusement? So they've really set the bar when it comes down to their offering in Trinidad and Tobago. Then in 2019, there was Endeavor Holdings. However, Endeavor Holdings, which is a real estate holding company, only raised TT $11 million vis-a-vis the $18 million target they had set. The IPO of Solace Marketing last year, August, was the first fully subscribed junior market SME IPO in the entire history. So they raised 11 million TT at a 33 million TT valuation. So think about it for a second. You had Cinema One, you had Endeavor Holdings. Neither reached their target and were both undersubscribed. Solace came to market, got proper take-up. Medcorp had their IPO just last month, but in actually June, and they raised 16.8 million TTD, which translates to 386 million Jamaican dollars, and that's actually the largest raise on the SME market to date on the TTME market. So really and truly, their market has taken some time to gain more market attention and interest, especially against the backdrop of the Trinidad and domestic situation.
Yeah,
so just
and
about that.
I have noticed that we've been gaining a lot of Trini viewers lately, and that Medcor IPO video got a lot of attention. So we had a lot of people messaging us about how can they participate in that IPO.
So just to get some further context, let's go back to the SME's founding, right? So whereas the Jamaican junior market said, hey, the first 5 years, you get 100% tax remission, and then you get 50% off the normal rate for the remaining 5 years. When the TTSME was introduced, it was an entirely different regime. So in Trinidad, their corporation tax, I believe, is 30% as a standard rate, right? So when you're listed in the TTSME market, you were taxed at a 10% rate for 5 years, and that was it. So whereas the junior market said, hey, first 5 years you get no tax, you have 100% tax remission, and the remaining 5 years you have a 50% tax remission. TTSME said, well, the Trinidad legislators at the time said you only going to get a reduced tax rate, not no tax at all together. So around 2019 or 2020, they actually amended their law to say, hey, you're going to get 5 years, 100% tax remission, and now 50% off the normal rate for the remaining 5 years afterwards. So they adjusted their setup to similarly match the Jamaican market. And in late 2024, the Trinidad and Tobago Securities and Exchange Commission approved a rule change by the TTSE, which is stock exchange itself, whereby their rule change was that the threshold move from 70 to 80% in terms of the maximum that a shareholder, can own in a company. So, in other words, when a company comes to this on the JSE right now, there has to be at least 20% of the shares owned by at least 100 shareholders for the company to list. In Trinidad, it was 30%. I think it was 100 shareholders, but 30% of the company had to go to other investors when there was a listing. So with this new structure, what happened was that companies could list at a larger valuation without giving up additional equity. So it's basically matched the junior market as well. So whereas we had gotten, a good amount of success over these last, I believe it's 16 years actually, on the JC junior market, Trinidad is still trying to better optimize their model to, match or set up to kind of see how they can better attract companies to go public.
Mm-hmm.
JC
and
junior
also to promote these opportunities better as well. And know that they are doing some work on the PR side to try to promote these opportunities, both to businesses to attract their listing and to the public.
Yeah, so just to kind of flip back a little bit, what I was going to point out was that on the JSC junior market, we've had over 55 companies listed to date, about 6 or 7 graduations to the main market. We've had T-Tech bought out. We have had the buyout by Grace Kennedy for Key Insurance, and we're just having, further succession and growth of these smaller companies, which, are still growing today. Trinidad is now trying to create or stimulate growth in its smaller business category segment to either spur greater domestic growth for these businesses or spur greater growth for their external opportunities that they foresee. So let me give an example. So Movietown said, hey, when it comes to Jamaica, COVID stopped that. There were issues. I remember speaking to Brian and Ingrid Jara a couple of years ago, and they said, they would have loved to come to Jamaica to actually do some work, in terms of just documenting our culture and, showing it across the region and other markets. So they mentioned Marcus Garvey and this part of Jamaican culture that it actually want to, partner on and document and monetize for the greater interest of the Caribbean. So they're just, they make it in Trinidad and Tobago, have 3 or 4 movie theaters, but they were still looking to diversify their product range to look at Jamaica to support their growth. So based on the conversation that I mentioned in Tobago, the SME market still represents one of these basic, pillars that they're trying to use to support further growth. But they're still learning to optimize the model for a better experience for all investors, because 10% was the rate they said they were going to do this for 5 years. They said, hey, this doesn't make no sense. Somebody's coming to the market. Mirror JSE during the market in terms of the tax benefits. Let's adjust the threshold now to 8%, try and get companies to list at better valuations. And just to give context, over there, you're required to raise between 5 million TT and 50 million TT to go public on the TTSME. So just to give context, that means you have to raise between 115 million and 1.15 billion TT, sorry, you have to raise between, I want to say 5 million, so when I say 5 million to 50 million TT, I'm referring to 150 million Jamaican dollars or 1.15 billion Jamaican dollars in capital raised on the market. So there's a larger space or spectrum for companies to actually raise capital. And something that somebody said to me last, which I found very interesting and might be something, for future discussion, is a dual cross listing of a company on the TTSME and the JSE junior market. Because one thing people don't seem to realize is that the JSE junior market says that you have to be a CARICOM company, I believe, from the main market rules. I'm not sure if it's in the junior market, but it's just one of the possibilities that could exist in the future, especially as regional leaders talk about a Caribbean stock exchange. Whilst there are still some technicalities that we need to be resolved, by the time is considering this whole discussion about this and other markets, it opens up a discussion, because we've seen whereby in Trinidad, Trinidad and Tobago is coming to Jamaica to raise 50 million USD. We have massive holdings, and when they came public on our question on our JSE market in January 2022, they said, hey, we're coming to Jamaica because we have growth plans, and Jamaica is forming part of our capital growth strategy to get capital to grow. We had even AS Braden refinancing the tier in Jamaica after the recent CPG acquisition. So Indian companies are expanding to Jamaica. Some are going to work on our market, others won't. But based on Trinidad's situation right now with the FX issues, you're going to definitely see more cross-regional interest. Companies coming from Trinidad to Jamaica, and companies from Jamaica going to Trinidad to raise capital or to acquire businesses.
I was going to ask you about that actually, because I remember there being these issues with raising capital in Trinidad, and the same thing that you brought up before, and also the issue of the FX situation in Trinidad continuing to affect the way companies are able to both raise money and pay out dividends. And that continues to be a situation that is plaguing Trinidad and Tobago. But yet we have the success of the Medcor IPO. So I wonder, David, is Medcor an outlier? So is Medcor the exception to the rule, or is this the start of a trend of seeing a very active capital market on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange?
So, we currently have 4 Jamaican companies cross-listed in TT Exchange: NCB, JMMB, Grace Kennedy. MPC is not Jamaican, they're Barbadian, but they're cross-listed as well. FPCPF is cross-listed as well. Guardian is cross-listed. Massey is cross-listed. So it's a really good point, because for a company like Medcor that is raising this large sum of capital that is the largest raise that they've had to date, it does indicate that investors do see potential opportunities in the capital markets, but it's just for these opportunities to match the reality. Because let's read this one for the viewers, right? So let's just say you have $1,000 US in your bank account right now, guys. In Jamaica, go to the bank, you say, I want my $1,000 US. The bank says, here you go, sir, on your way. In Trinidad, go to the bank, they're like, do you have any evidence? Evidence of what? Traveling, what are you doing? I have things to do. But sir, we have an allocation thing right now. So person told me that they've had to go to the bank, show evidence they're going to travel, and even when they do go to the bank, you probably get only $200 US for the day. And
I know that all too well here in Belize because we have foreign currency restrictions here as well. So it's a whole lot. You have to get permission from the central bank to get US.
And that's a similar situation in Barbados as well, where you have to actually apply for permission from the central bank of Barbados to get, FX as well. But in Trinidad, they didn't have these kind of extreme issues over probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, but it's gotten so tough in recent times. So you found combination that now forced based on the relatively harsh environment to adapt to better environments for growth. So there's this window company, based at Summit right now out of Trinidad. I believe there's this company out of Trinidad as well that is making ice cream products. They say they want to export to Jamaica, other markets. And we've seen so many companies, even Movitown and so on, say they want to expand to Jamaica because growth opportunity relies in Jamaica based on the population size and just the economic climate. So is it going to be the established big players, or are you going to see growth from the smaller players instead? Because I cannot recall the last time when there's been a main market, or I should say a general market listing on the TTSE market from a junior market offering, or should I say SME market listing. So in their case, they do have the government, the Trinidad and Tobago bond listings that are always ongoing, but from the private sector space, it's relatively still private, not seeing as many capital markets offerings in the general sphere. So to see, the SME market in this case leading some market interest does speak volumes. And we also shouldn't forget the fact that the further cross-regional listings across the markets does create opportunity for persons in countries like Barbados, and Trinidad that have FX constraints to source capital.